outcomes. And we want this to be interactive, so we don't want us just to talk at you. We'd like you to then bounce back at us as well. So let's go ahead and get started.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Jill Parrott. I'm in the English department. I'm a professor in the English department. I've been here about 13 years now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jim Blair. I'm a assistant dean, chair of the faculty, and associate professor of marketing over at the College of Business. I'm in my 7th year at EKU.
Hi, I'm Sara. I'm a psychology professor. I'm an associate professor in the psychology department, and related to scholarly topics, I direct the multilingual laboratory, which is a research lab, and I also mentor students at data initiatives.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Lauk. I'm an associate professor of educational leadership in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Educational Leadership. This is my 5th year here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Burns, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Ed Leadership. And this is my 10th year here at EKU. Now, what do I do with this?
Thank you. I didn't mention I'm 6th year. Okay. So okay. So we've got.
Do you want us to introduce ourselves on Zoom too?
Oh yeah, of course. We have George and Kelly and Tiffany. Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Kelly Smith. I'm the director of collections and discovery in the library. And crazily, April will be my 20th year working at EKU.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Ashley, and I am an associate professor in the social work department. And this is my 3rd year at EKU. Right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tiffany Hamblin. I'm the director of sponsor programs here at EKU. And like Kelly, I'm in my 20th year here at the university, and all of my time has been spent in sponsor programs.
Great. Thank you very much. I also made a note. Anytime people are asking about resources and you want to interject, Kelly and Tiffany, please feel free to interject. Okay. Okay. So we have some questions prepared, and what we hope this panel will accomplish is to help you brainstorm new ideas about your scholarly agenda, how to be successful and maintain your scholarly agenda, how to think deeply and intentionally about your scholarly agenda, and how to maintain that. Okay. So I get to ask the questions, and the rest of the panel gets to answer first. All right. So I guess we can just kind of, whoever wants to speak up first can go first. How did you establish your scholarly priorities as a professor at EKU? Who wants to start off with that?
Well, I'll start by saying that what I thought was my scholarly priority turned out not to be that at all. Because when I first started, I had a couple opportunities to do some research and publish on topics that were kind of related to the work that I've done, but really I was just chasing the first publications. And the lesson that I learned there was you've got to love the topic that you've got because you're going to live with it for a long, long time. The first couple of topics that I chose was an opportunity to do some research in an area that was just vaguely connected to what I had been doing before. And I said, oh yeah, sure, I can do this. It was a chapter for an edited book. It was the most painful thing that I've ever done in my life. And it just wasn't something I wanted to do. And it was just horrible. And I've never done any, but I did it. I got my chapter and my citation, but I've never touched it again and never will. And I've moved on to the areas that I really do love. And those are the topics that will take me for a long, long time.
So I think building a little bit of that on that, I think it's helpful if you have some ideas that you want to drive. When I've talked with assistant professors about this in my department, sometimes they want to be super flexible for the students, and students come to you with like very crazy out there, and some of that is fun, but you also want to have your own, right? So I think it's important to establish something where you have some lines and some ideas, somewhat flexible, but then when students come, you can bring them to kind of your own topic. And in kind of thinking about that, you also want to think about your promotion and tenure materials, right? You're going to have to write this narrative, and it should be somewhat cohesive, right? It shouldn't be like, and these are 50 things I've done in completely unrelated and different topics, right? That I've seen it. It's not, it doesn't look pretty, right? So if you have like 3 or 5 kind of general things that you like and that you are like, okay, these are big picture topics. And then within that, you can be flexible and move around. But I think that helps you guide and establish that general picture.
And picking up on that, I think it's important to, as soon as you get here in the first like year or 2 that you're here, make sure you go to one of the writing institutes that's offered by the Teaching and Learning Center, because they will help you focus your writing so very much. I attended more than 1 year because they just are so helpful. And I just think that it is, I know when I came, I had been in K-12 education for probably more years than most of you all are old. And so I kind of felt like an imposter, and it was hard for me to get started because I felt like, well, I don't really have anything to say that anybody wants to hear. But just through working with other people, my very first year, we established a group of people within the department that we all held each other accountable. And we all would meet regularly, and we would say, okay, what are you working on? Do you need feedback? And we were critical friends to each other. That was very helpful. And then once you start making connections with other universities and other people where you're going to conferences, then you'll find other people, additional people who can you can partner with and study with and do research with. And that, I think, is very important. Start small, but start. Make sure you start. Make sure you write something. That's the best way to start.
Are you still doing the PLC?
Not this year.
Oh, okay.
I would also say too, when you're putting your research agenda together, make sure you take some time to sit down with whether it's your chair or the committee that goes through like the tenure evaluation process. And at least when I viewed it, I looked at it as a big game, right? So there's different points in the game. There's different things that count. Some things count more or less than others. Figure out what are those important things, what are like the benchmarks that I need to hit, and make those your top priority, because at the end of the game, you want to get the tenure, right? So as you're going through and building your research agenda, I would echo what the other panelists have been saying. Find those areas that you're passionate about and that you care about. But when you're looking at like some of those target journals or book chapters or conference proceedings, whatever it might be, you want to just start going through and checking off those boxes and saying, this is when I'm going to hit this target. This is when I'm going to go after this journal publication. So you've got a clear timeline that meets before whenever your deadline is for tenure, and so that you're not scrambling at the last minute. So I think that's a really big thing, is talk with some of those people, even people who recently got tenure. They'd be able to help you walk through that process and figure those things out. One other thing, because we're around this time of the year, probably your chair or someone is putting the schedule together. I know what was really helpful for me was, if you have, being brand new, you're putting together your course material, you're teaching, and we love interacting with our students. If you're able to get similar preps as last year or teach similar courses, you don't have to redesign or recreate something new. So if there's any opportunities within your department to have a similar like course structure for that next semester, I think that helped me free up a lot of time my second year to be able to say, these are the times in the day that I'm going to be focusing on my research blocks, instead of creating like new examples or new assignments or new PowerPoints for those lectures.
It's a really good transition to what I had to say, which is you don't have to start from scratch. I actually got my promotion from assistant to associate using manuscripts that I had started in graduate school and seminars that I used to then get published. So do you have something that's kind of good that you turned in to a seminar a few years ago? Is it still relevant? Could you update it and submit it that way? And yeah, I genuinely believe that that was a big help to me to just like kickstart immediately in my first 2 or 3 years, getting a couple of publications in, because I had something in my back pocket to work on that I hadn't had time to get published when I was working on my dissertation, right? Because if I was going to be writing, I was going to be working on my dissertation. But now being done with the dissertation and here, I could go back and look at those and was able to make that happen.
Jason, can I just want to jump in here?
Of course, please.
Another area, because I'm thinking sometimes people are having trouble trying to figure out what should I write about, right? And so one of the areas that can help you is when you attend some of these conferences, there may be an area that you're interested in and just listening to what people are presenting, right? Because oftentimes just by sitting in those sessions, right, ideas will be evoked from those sessions. Sometimes they'll talk about, we need more research in this area. And if this is an area that you're interested in, right, you've got like the crumbs, if I could say it that, right, to start pursuing those areas. And also making some linkages with other people in other universities that might be interested in the same topic or same area as you, right? So you don't have to be by yourself in terms of doing this. I found that that's a great way of meeting people, right, who have a similar interest as you, right, and getting going. Some of these individuals actually have written before, and so you can also work together with them in some of those areas.
I've also had success with that strategy as well, complimenting a presenter at a conference on their presentation and kind of sharing similar research interests has definitely led to collaborative research projects for me.
And I would say that same concept applies if you're thinking about pursuing external funding for your research. What you're hearing presented at conferences can connect you with the right people, potentially to do some collaborative grants where there's groups of people from different institutions working together on one type of research. But it can also help you identify funding sources. If someone is talking about research that they've done, there might be an acknowledgement right there in their presentation, or it might be something that you could ask about afterwards. Like, how did you get this funded? This looks expensive. How did you make this happen? So I think those are really powerful connections to make.
Yeah, and everyone almost said everything I was going to say too, I think. But another thing, going with the flow a little bit, you want to have control of what you want to do in your research, but also going with the flow. I started off thinking I was going to go one direction, and then 1 month into my first semester, the dean said, "Oh, well, if you want to do this, I'll give you some more money." And I said, "Well, okay, I guess we'll do that." But also learning to say no to things is really hard when you get opportunities. So you don't want to broaden your research scope so much that you can't do anything, but you do want to have it focused. And one way I was able to do that was going to conferences, collaborating, kind of going with the flow, but you still got to stick with what you want to do, right? Any other comments or questions from the audience? Yeah. There we go.
So my question is, I'm doing my first research study this semester. How do I make that more than one journal article? Because I thought it was one journal article, and somebody was like, "Oh, you can get multiple articles out of this." I'm like, how? And so that's my question.
What field are you in?
Aviation.
Oh, okay. Someone closer to that.
My
I was
study,
too fast.
my study this semester is literally just how to get students to do more of the reading before they come to class and take notes. So it's not aviation specific.
Reading, perfect. Okay, there we go. So I can give you an example with reading. I was like aviation, I don't know, but I think you can always do more than one, and especially if you have different perspectives, right? So for example, one very typical in my field is the quantitative versus qualitative, right? I'm collaborating with a colleague. I do language, and this is schizophrenia and language. And then the quantitative is all the tests we did, but then they have all these transcriptions of their discourse. And that's a whole other paper, right? Like a qualitative piece. If you're talking reading, we recently published a series of articles. The nice things about a series is that the second and the third is so much easy to publish because the editor published the first, and you say, hey, look at the first one. Like, this is, all of these people cited it. Now you need to publish the second and the third one or whatever. So we did like a series. The first one was, what do students do in terms of critical reading? And then we did the faculty side, what do faculty think students should do? And then we did the actual experimental, what do students actually do? Not just what they say they do, but what they actually do, or whatever. However you want to frame it, I think whenever you can get more than one, right? And this is just a couple of examples, but like if you have two approaches, two populations, two ways of thinking about it that will go in different journals, right? Like think about it, or it can be the same journal, but one after the other. And even if you collect all the data at once, you can still, like, I'm now waiting for one to be published before I submit the part two, because I want to submit it to the same journal and I don't want to like overwhelm them with all my papers at the same time. That's just some ideas.
I think that's such an important question that you ask, because it's all about efficiency. My area of research is qualitative research, and I responded to a call for a book chapter on a different topic that was really a topic close to my heart. I did that, but I had so much data that I couldn't use in the original book chapter because of word limitations. And so I did a second article that used data that wasn't included in the original one and published it in the Journal of Educational Research and Jectol that you'll hear from Dr. Burns in a bit. And then I still had so much data that I couldn't use in the first or the second versions. So now I'm doing it as a book that's also incorporating some of my experiences, a memoir plus the qualitative interviews. So do that, work efficiently.
And then there could be an alternate route that you want to take too. Sometimes if you do have that qualitative and quantitative, depending on the field, like I know in marketing with marketing education, if you've got a mixed methods paper, you may be able to shoot for like a higher level of educational journal with that aerospace management area. So I think there's definitely opportunities where if you're breaking it up into two, you get more of the publications. But if you have both of those studies together or both of those data sets, sometimes that'll let you hit like a higher level within your particular field, whether it's aerospace management or aerospace management education. So something to think about strategically as to like what you need to get tenure, if it's like the number that counts, if you need certain like quality types of publications. So you can kind of play that game different ways. But if you've got an educational piece and you're teaching that class regularly, the next time that you're teaching that class, you may be able to collect data again, but then look at different like dependent variables, different outcome variables, whether it's maybe confidence next time or meeting certain learning outcomes or student objectives.
This is not a direct answer to your question, and you could not know this, but before you got here, we had a university-wide reading project, the QEP, and I was co-director of that project. We have tons of materials that could help you and a context on campus that you were not here for that we can fill you in on to help fill in some of the gaps for your research. So you should send me an email. Okay.
Perfect. Why don't we go on to the next one because it will build on kind of what we've been talking about. What practices have proven successful in your research and scholarly practices at EKU? Kind of been talking about that. So why don't we go ahead? Yeah.
Okay. So collaborate. That has been a huge success for me. I think the majority of the publications that I have been collaborative in some way with colleagues, either in my department or a different department or the library, because I work with the library a lot. And we talk about collaboration a lot, but one of the reasons that collaborating with others has been successful for me in research and writing is that I will let myself down, but I'm not gonna let Trina in the library down, right? Like if we set a goal, I would just fly right by it for myself, but I'm gonna meet that goal because I have told other people that I am going to meet that goal, right? Genuinely, that is something that has helped me. A project might seem overwhelming for me to work on individually, but if there are 2 or 3 of us doing it, it seems much less overwhelming. It seems much more like it's something that that we can accomplish, and we share the burden not only of getting it done, but of sending it out, of doing the revisions, and all of those different kinds of things. And in addition to that, really practical advice, people that I've worked with, a thing that I find really works. Google Docs is amazing. My whole life is on Google Drive. I don't know how to live without Google Drive. So having that asynchronous ability is wonderful. but setting aside a time to sit down with each other and get things done, even if you don't talk, has been really a worthwhile endeavor for me, even if it's on Zoom, even if we're not in person. Setting aside, all right, I have 1 hour this week in my schedule that I can work on this. And they're like, oh, me too. Thursday at 9, I can do that. And we get together to make things happen. Life-changing for me to do it together and set a goal. We're going to get 2 pages done in this hour. This is happening, right? And make it happen.
Absolutely. I would echo what Jill was saying, having those collaborations, whether it's within your department, even interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary across the departments. You may see that people in other colleges within EKU have similar interests or things that overlap. There's great opportunities there for collaboration, as well as what Ann was saying earlier at conferences, being able to find some of those peers at other institutions that may be able to work and collaborate together. I know one thing that I really valued, where I was coming from a PhD program where like all the professors there are working with the PhD students, right? They've almost got like a machine where they're able to get their publications out. I think there's a lot of opportunities here at EKU where we have some doctoral programs, but being able to tap into whether it's a master's student or through our honors program where they are going to be working on research, there's a lot of opportunities for win-wins. And even over at the Model Lab across the street, I've been very happy with the collaborations where they actually have a senior research project. And I appreciate all the students that have been sent my way interested in business and marketing. We've been able to have different conference proceedings as a result of a high school senior working on a project. And I have one currently with Tanner Martin, who ended up going to EKU, and he's a freshman in business now, but it's a B-level journal for like College of Business ranking. So we're in the first round review. I don't know how it'll work out, but if you find a student where maybe they are driven or they have a motivation to like research a topic, or they're willing to help like uncover the literature review or learn how to do a t-test or whatever it might be, that can help like free up some of your time and get some of that productivity down and still get some of those solid publications out into the field.
I want to build on that idea with the students. I think finding a rhythm that is kind of like yearly for me has been very helpful. So we have some classes like McNair, honors, in which they do thesis and these research projects. So if you can make sure that you're working with them on topics that advances both of your interests, right? Like the students' interest and your interest, that's super helpful. And then you can start getting a sense of what the timelines are realistic, right? So for us in our department, we have a series in which we have like thesis 1 is like 1 semester, then it's thesis 2, and then we have a publication class. And I've gotten like several publications just from students, right? Like it's 2 authors, the student and me, and we've gone through the process. And on that same idea of with the students, you also can do your own research scholarly agenda, but you can also do all the educational piece, right? We have pedagogic, and so how I structure the timeline in my lab, they all kind of have to present in the spring semester, right? Like they collect data in the fall. It depends of the McNair, they have to do in the summer. So each one is a little different, but getting a rhythm in which you have a sense like, okay, we're gonna be, finding reference around here, collecting data around here, analyzing, publishing around here. It gets you into the rhythm yearly or semester based or however you want to organize it. That I think it makes it achievable and reasonable, but also you're making progress and you have, couple projects in each stage of every year. I found that really helpful.
I think one of the things that really helped me was to think big. And to think bigger than you may think is appropriate for you. I mean, I'm in school leadership. I thought, I could do my research with a computer and a Zoom link. And I did. And I got enough publications and I got promoted. But then through the pushing of my dean and through the resource that is one of EKU's treasures, Tiffany Hamblin, with sponsored programs, I'm in the final stages of writing a large grant application at the Spencer Foundation to do some really expansive research that I never considered. And so I really want to just mainly give a plug for sponsored programs and for Tiffany as a resource here, and to think bigger than what you think you can get by with.
And I think with that, with what Dr. Lauk was saying about think bigger than what you think, and the collaboration piece, that to me is one of the most important things because you may think that you have like a really good idea, but you are not exactly sure how to flesh it out or pursue it or whatever, or, you know, someone else may have a different angle that will work better. And so I think it's important to make sure, is that, oh, here it is. So I think it's important to make sure that you're collaborating with people who have like goals that you have. And then, like I said, that when I very first started doing some article writing, we did a book study, the group of people that I collaborated with on campus. We did a book study of this particular book. And it was just an excellent book, and it all kept us, focused, and it kept us all together. And we kind of went through the processes and went through the steps of how you could. Now I will be honest with you. I did not get an article published in 12 weeks. I will be, but the steps are there, and it is very clear and very good. Got checklist, but it didn't happen in 12 weeks. But protect, my next thing would be protect your writing time. Okay. What I mean by don't let your committee work and your advising work and all the other university things, and then you think, well, I'll just get to that. I'll get to my writing. Protect your time. If you have to go in your calendar and block off time, block it off and say, this is time, this is my writing time. Because after all, I mean, that's part of why we're being paid. So make sure that you're protecting that particular time, because if you don't protect it, you'll just keep pushing it. You'll just keep pushing it, and then you'll come up for tenure and you won't have what you need. And that would be a travesty.
Do you want to plug the journal?
I want to plug the journal, and a place that you can possibly submit an article, not right now because I don't know where the link is because of the new transfer to the new web, but I'll find it and then I'll send it out. EKU has, I think they have several. Well, this is not the only journal that EKU is sponsors. We have a journal called the Journal of Education. I don't even remember it. The Kentucky Journal of, tell me.
Excellence in Teaching and Learning.
Excellence. And I'm even the editor of it. I can't remember. It's such a mouthful. So I call it the Cajectal because that's what, to me, it's easier to remember. Anyway, so we have this journal, and it is open to all universities. It's an international journal. We've accepted articles from other people. It is blind peer reviewed by 2 different people, and you get feedback. And this is a good place to start if you haven't submitted articles before, because we're really kind. We get people who the people who are reading them, the reviewers, they are people just like you and me. And they want you to be successful, and they want to help you and support you in your work, because they're professors just like you and I. And so that's a good place to start, because, I'll keep sending it back to you and say, okay, make these corrections. And then you send it back in, and I'll send it back to the reviewers, and they'll say, yeah, that was what I meant, or no, it needs some more work. And we'll work with you until we hopefully till you get tired of us. And then we'll get you published.
But you do have to check, because like Jim and I have had the conversation, he can publish, but it's not going to count towards his promotion and tenure.
Yes.
Just because of the requirements of his college. So
Yeah.
you just need to check.
I have, sorry, just to build, just to build real quickly, on what was just said, I put the link to the journal, the education journal, in the Zoom here. There's also the Kentucky Journal of Undergraduate Scholarship that we host in the library. And this, of course, would be for your students who you think might have strong research to submit. But also, several EKU faculty have used this, had their name in here as a mentorship byline. So James Maples in sociology, I was just looking at the most recent issue. He's got a couple of articles in here where he's listed as a mentor. So that's another opportunity as well.
And I'll send that out too to the group.
And really quick, just to go along, I'm hearing the word collaboration a lot. And so I'd just like to reiterate, and I'm glad I think this is a nice diverse panel. So I'm in nuclear physics, and we do experiments that take 10 to 20 years. And so I have to identify projects to go along the way. I started collaborating with one institution, then they started collaborating with another institution and said, oh yeah, this guy did that. And so you start to build a network outside of EKU. And I think that's really what helped me take the next step. But also, if you're mentoring students in research, I think my group's like 6 or so now, we like to try to have weekly group meetings, like scheduled time. I'm going to sit down with all the students right here. We're going to talk about what we're going to do for the week. They all know I'm busy, but we have to take some time out to make sure that you make contact with the students every week. I think that's been really important.
That's a nice introduction to Kendall Simpson's question, which is in the chat. And since we're bringing up students, she asks, regarding working with students, is there any advice for scaling projects up or down for graduate or undergraduate students? Should we consider mechanisms of student mentoring with both student populations? I know many of you have experience mentoring, working alongside student research groups. So any thoughts on Kendall's question?
I've had experience where been training a student maybe for 1 or 2 years, maybe up to 3 years. Sometimes they can start working after their sophomore year. And then once they get to the senior level, they can start peer mentoring the students that are coming up in the next, as sophomores. And that's actually worked out quite nicely. I've even collaborated with, since we don't have a graduate program, I collaborated with graduate students in computer science, because I also do computational physics, and then they would start to help the undergraduates. And so you can build a network of peer mentoring at both levels. And that's been successful.
Yeah, I want to build on that. And I don't know, my experience has been that undergrad, grad doesn't make that much of a difference for me. I'm talking, right, like a 4th year undergrad, 1st year master, our doctoral students, 1st or 2nd year. For me, what has really made the difference is how long have they been working with me? So I've done like a little hierarchy. I call them junior research assistants, and senior research assistants. So if you've been 3 semesters with me, I know you know how to do things. And then my senior research assistants mentor my juniors, and this can be at any level. So I have, if you just join my lab, even if you're a master's student, you're still a junior, versus if you're a 3rd year undergrad, but you're really good, you're a senior, you can mentor my grad student, right? So for me, the hierarchy has been more about knowledge than about, now in some of my 500, 700 level classes, I do have some more assignments on the grad students who do some mentoring, but it's more mentoring, like career type mentoring, right? Like, how to apply to grad school? If you're in grad school, you're more likely to know how to do that. But in terms of research skills, I found it more at the student level and what the skills and research trajectory they've done at those levels. But I don't know if other people have different experiences.
I think mine has been more what Sara was talking about. Just it was someone that I knew. This is when I was over at Model, and it was someone that I knew because I'd hired this person, and then he started school working on his EDD, and I worked with him on a journal article. But it was more about, it was a specific topic that we both were familiar with. We both knew what it was. I knew his work ethic. I knew, it was a very specific graduate example.
I think too, when you're working with the students, even taking out like whether they're high school student or undergrad or grad student, I think getting to figure out what like their strengths and weaknesses are as their skill sets and trying to give them like different tasks or parts of the project can go a long ways. And then especially too, like Anne was talking about with the work ethic, if you've got somebody that's eager and motivated to learn and you're doing like what Jason was saying with like weekly or bi-weekly meetings, I mean, you can go through and show them like, this is Excel, this is how you run a t-test. We move this state over to this column, this state over to this column. This is what the interpretation is. We want it less than 0.05. There's a difference, right? You can work with them and show them how to do some of these like simpler tasks or start to get more confidence in whether it's the statistics, the literature review, how to develop your hypotheses, whatever aspects it might be. And then depending on what their level is, there's going to be some things that they just can't do. So even when I was working with like the high school student, Tanner, I was like, okay, we're going to do these t-tests. He was able to handle that. He did the lit review, but I was like, there may be some other variables that can like flip or reverse these effects. It's called moderating variables. I'm going to add these couple into our survey and I'll do that analysis. And then I'll explain to you what I'm doing and what's going on. So I think there's certain things that you can kind of take the leadership on or run that part of the study, but then still explain to the students so they're learning that process, and that may get them more eager to sign up for math or statistics classes or to pursue a graduate school opportunity down the road. But it's just kind of getting to understand that student and where they're at and what they're able to help out with at that time.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes. Do you need a?
I was just curious, for the Kentucky Journal of Undergraduate Scholarship, do the students need to submit their article as the first authors, or do we need to co-author with them, like they would be the first author and then whoever advisor could be the second author? How does that work?
Go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, well, I'm pretty sure the student needs to be the first author. I was just looking at the policies page. I don't know. Yeah.
But can they also
Any undergraduate student currently enrolled at a post-secondary education institution in Kentucky. So it's not just EKU students, it's undergrads around the state. Yeah,
Okay.
authors are they're the main author.
Okay, great, thanks.
One other thing to keep in mind when you're working with students too, and this is something I learned from like one of my mentors, is whenever I'm working with a student, I always tell them they're going to be the lead on the project. They're going to get their name first. But then I also explain like the academic system and how everything works and what I'm going to be contributing. And I let them know like I would like my name on the paper as well, but I'm usually the one that's going to be the last author on that paper when we're doing any of that collaboration. Because I think for you all, when you're going to be acting in that mentorship role, you're going to be guiding through that process. That's something that you want to get rewarded for, but at the same time, I think having that student be like the lead on the project, that's going to open up so many doors for them in graduate school to be able to say like, hey, I can be your research assistant. I want to be like a grad assistant. I've been able to lead this project. These are the tasks that I was able to do. This is the data analysis I was able to run. But at the same time, like you're going through that 10-year process, you want to make sure you're getting some points for that activity as well.
Yeah, I can add to that really quick. Yeah, so that's been really important in our field as well, and in the sciences, is that we try to make the lead author the student, and then you can be the affiliated author, which is usually the last author, like Jim said, and that actually carries more weight, I think, than me being a lead author. Like I don't actually expect to be a lead author in any papers going forward ever again. I actually don't want to. I'd rather the students be. So that's something to consider.
I don't know if this is discipline specific or just practice, or with my collaborators, what we usually do is whoever takes the lead on the paper. So whoever is submitting and resubmitting and editing and doing the work on the paper, that person gets first author. So in my lab, all the students get first dibs on that if they want to, but then I have students who graduate and disappear, that happens. And they may have done a great job, but at that point, we usually have a conversation. Hey, should we flip authors? Should I get in front, or should we put, for example, if we have, sometimes I have doctoral students who are very motivated because they are getting to job market, they want that first author. It's like, hey, we put you as first author. As they were saying, I like to keep last author for myself because that is the senior position usually. But then in between my students who may have been collaborating or working, I think it's really important to have an honest conversation before you start writing this. This is gonna save you so much trouble, because sometimes people don't talk about it and just assume, and especially if you're collaborating across institutions or with multiple senior people, multiple students at different levels, it can create problems. So I think before you start writing, everyone is clear, okay, who is actually doing the writing, who is the person sending that article to get feedback from everyone else, who is accepting, incorporating the comments and changes, right? That person in my between my collaborators and as far as I know in my field, that usually is the first author. But this seems to be discipline specific, collaborator specific. So my strong recommendation is talk about it. There are very fancy long contracts for some of these. I think that's a little overkill. Like if you come to me with a strong collaborator contract, I might be put off by it. But I think talking about it, having just a chat, a conversation, who wants to be what do you expect by being in that position, authorship, what are you contributing or what am I contributing? I think that is and it's also nice to be third and fourth. I'm a methodologist, I like research, and I have a bunch of papers in which I'm third or fourth because I ran analysis for them and they added me as a co-author, and that's very nice, and that gets you papers too, right? So there's different ways of collaborating and different positions to be in. So just think about it and talk to people about it.
Did we have anything on Zoom? Okay. Any other comments or questions at the time? Yeah.
Right on the end is Jill, is that right? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and sorry about that. So you mentioned how you were a teacher and then you kind of transitioned into higher education and how daunting that could be. I'm in that boat right now. So I feel like there's so many options for research. There's so many different avenues. I kind of have interest throughout. Any recommendation for honing in, picking a topic, and just kind of getting started?
Well, I attended a meeting, John Maxwell, you won't know who John Maxwell is. And he said, just write every day and it will come to you. And I know, Dr. Carpenter, when I did the Writing Institute with him, my first couple of years here, he said, it's a good idea to have 2 or 3 or maybe more different. And now I'm calling on you now when you've got a mouthful of food. I'm sorry for that. But have 2 or 3 different topics that you really are interested in, and have them like on a stove, like you've got all these different pots kind of going. And then what I did was I took a book that was called Scaling the Something Mountain, and I can't think of the name of it, but there were all kinds of different journals in the back of this book. And so I started looking at some of these journals that caught my eye that I thought would match what I was interested in. And so I started reading those articles to see how they were formatted, to see how they looked, to see and I even went so far as to a couple of places I edited, like the Journal for Rural Education. I volunteered to be an editor, to be a blind reviewer for them, so that I could see how they set their articles up and what they were looking for. And then after about 2 years, I got my courage up to submit something, because it just, you just, like I said, when you're from outside of academia, it's hard to know what is needed. And so that was just kind of how I figured it out. I just kind of worked through it and thought about a couple of journals that I really wanted to apply to. And then I just started kind of stalking them.
Yeah.
So that I had an idea of what they liked and what they published.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
That stove image that Ann mentioned, I think is really helpful for me. I had heard it from Silas House, the Kentucky Poet Laureate, in a writing workshop. And you think of the stove and you've got, you can't have everything at the same pressure and the same heat all the time. You've got something that's kind of your focus. That's where all the fire's going, the burners on high. But the other projects are kind of simmering out there. They're not cold. They're not just sitting there idle. And then you kind of switch the heat at different times as your attention moves to those different ones. And so I found that to be a good way to kind of balance those 2 or 3 projects that you may have. Yeah.
Building off of that stove analogy, when you all say protect your time for writing, what do you mean? Like, is that an hour? Is that, because as a fellow, I'm new to playing higher education because I still don't feel like I'm really, I feel like I'm just playing still. How do you determine how much writing time you need to do the things.
I think I've kind of organized my office hours to coincide with my face-to-face class. Most of our courses are online asynchronous, but I've got one face-to-face. And so I've tried to put all my office hours on the same day as the face-to-face class. So I think that the way I'll answer that is I have my theoretical protected time, then there's the reality. And it's up to everyone, you know, how you work best. I've got my time protected in theory, but I'm not a terribly disciplined person, so that doesn't always work out. The tips you've already heard about blocking out time is, I think, one of the most effective ones. I remember when I did the new faculty orientation, there was a faculty member who's no longer here who showed his schedule, and he used colors and blocked it out and protected his time, and he was very disciplined, so it worked for him. I guess everyone's different.
I'm that person. I have color-coded blog calendar, so I can share my experience if that helps. So for me, what I landed on, so I was getting really pull in very different directions, which I found stressful. And we know from attention, it's not helpful. So I tried to organize myself in that I teach Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And those days I teach, I grade and answer students' emails about teaching. So I try to do all the course prep and teach and all that on those days. And then Thursdays, I do all my meetings just because, you know, I feel like meetings sometimes distract you. So I try to schedule my meetings on Thursdays when possible. All of this is, again, theoretical. And then on Tuesdays is my research days. And I try to blog, you know, at least like 4 or 5 hours to just sit down and focus. But what I found that really helpful is not just the blogging time. I've set up my students' calendar in that they owe me things on Monday. So they send me their analysis, their manuscripts, their grants, their blogs, whatever they're working on, they all send it to me on Mondays. And then I have Tuesday's blog, but it's not just Tuesday's blog, is I have to give them back to them by the end of the day, Tuesday, ideally, some of these projects. And for me, kind of like what Jill was saying, having other people make you accountable is helpful. And in my case, it's the students most of the times, but because I have to give them, you know, feedback on that paper or finalize that analysis or make sure their data is looking good, that kind of helps me. It's like, it helps me focus on those Tuesdays research for me. But this is, like you said, very personal. And if you have coordinator positions, program director positions, and many others, then good luck.
And that was going to be my follow-up question for any of you on the panel that may have an admin role involved in there as well. What do you do?
I can answer that just because this is my first year in this position. Prior to that, though, I would probably echo what Ray's saying. It's different for each person as to like how they're blocking off the research time, but I didn't teach on Fridays and I need big blocks. I'm not very good at, oh, here's a half hour here, here's an hour here. Like I would block off and call it research Fridays. I knew very few people were in the College of Business on Fridays. I'd be able to go in there. I'd know that I'd have like several hours to do data analysis, or I'd have several hours to like revise a paper or work on a manuscript, whatever it might be. Fridays were like those days. But I'll be honest, this fall was the first time I did not have a manuscript under review for a couple of months. And that terrified me because I'm still testing out this role. I know when I was talking with like Tom and Trish, when they hired me, I was like, I really love teaching in the classroom. It's really rewarding with the students. I like doing research. This is something I want to pursue with admin, but I don't know if it's going to be the right fit or not. And I still don't want all my eggs in that basket, and I want to still be productive with research. And a lot of the people that have those positions, they say that the research is what falls by the wayside. So we just had a little girl back in August. So I'm juggling like being dad at home, trying to help out my wife, new position. But over winter break, I made it a point where I'm blocking off time like during the winter season to be able to get publications out. And that's where I got like 2 out to Journal Global Scholars of Marketing Science, 1 out to International Journal of Sport Communication. I've got another under review at Foreign Trade Review. So during break, at least for me, I was able to like push out some that were very close to being published and get those done. Another thing that really helped me is with those 2 Journal of Global Scholars of Marketing Science. Those are special issues. And I would even give that advice to everybody out here. In your field, a lot of times they're special issues, which they're like a short like timeline as to getting your publication through the review process. And maybe it gets accepted, maybe it doesn't, but it kind of holds you accountable to move through those stages a little bit faster. And if it lines up the research topic or theme with your research, it can make make it move along. So those kind of help get those projects out over winter break, but I've been heavily relying on those because in the admin position, Monday through Friday, it's just different things pop up, or at least for me, there's surprises a lot of time, and I just cannot block off any time for research. I'm hoping this summer I get to jump back into it just like I did winter.
One concrete thing that does work for me though is when I'm in the office, that's when I can grade papers. I can do class planning. I can grade a paper and then look up and say hi to my colleague. I can go back to the next paper and grade that. But I do not even attempt to do my research and scholarship in the office because of the distractions, the socialization, the other people there. I only will even attempt that at home where I'm by myself without distraction. So I do try to control the environment that way.
I have like 6 thoughts, so I'm going to prioritize. The first one is I work in big chunks of time as well. I have, even if I need to get something done, gotten a hotel room for the night and just been like, this is my writer's retreat. I can't even be in my house because I'm going to dust, I'm going to vacuum, I'm going to do laundry. I'm going to take any excuse to not, like, I make the joke that my house has never been as clean as it was when I was working on my dissertation because I would use that as a distraction. So those are the kinds of things that that we can do. Regarding like administrative work, for me, that actually helped me to get publications because I double dipped, right? So I was the writing program administrator for a decade for first year writing and the critical reading program, our QEP, that took like 6 or 7 years of my life away doing that. But I got publications out of that work, doing that work. So it doesn't necessarily have to be either or. I think depending on what it is that you are doing, you might be able to also double dip using those roles.
Okay.
I think something else to think about is if you're having a hard time finding the time to do the research and then also to write the publications, pursue external funding to support your work. Like you can get reassigned time from teaching so that you are required to dedicate a certain amount of time every week that's funded by an external grant. And then you're having that time to be able to do the research and then to prepare your publications or otherwise disseminate. You know, it can be a source of resources to help you get to conferences or anything like that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. I was going to say something about that too. That's helped me a lot. So I've been applying for grants. Had them over the last 3 or 4 years. I've had reassigned time. You can apply for summer salary. So if you feel like you're like, oh, I'm actually working over the summer and I'm not getting paid. Actually feels a lot better when you do work over the summer and you get paid to do it.
For sure.
That if that's something that you're thinking about, that's something that I would try to pursue. And there's been a lot of experience actually here, and I've talked to a lot of folks, not only in the sciences, but across colleges, and we've been able to collaborate, get ideas, right? Maybe we don't collaborate directly, but we just hear what other people are doing, strategies. And so I've heard a lot of success stories. So if you're interested in grants, please feel free to reach out to us. Any other questions from the faculty? Yeah.
Just following up on that, how do you go about applying for such summer salaries? Is that designated for research time? What does that look like? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, it all starts off with a project. You have to propose a project and you have to say, okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to require this much time, which means that I will budget so I don't know, like I only know NSF, for example, National Science Foundation. Other institutions or other programs also have things like where you can only apply for up to 2 summer months. They just say you technically only have 2 summer months. You technically have 2.8 or whatever, but you can only do 2. So you just say this project will take 1 month of my time, and if sometimes you can apply for just your time. So you can apply for summer month of your salary, right? So it's just you take whatever your monthly pay is, you just get another month. You can get reassigned time, and so then they will pay the university what that fraction of your time would have been And usually it's up to 20%. I think, is that the max, Tiffany, 20%?
It's not the max, but 20% is the equivalent of one course. So in some departments, you might be able to do 2 courses a semester, or sometimes it's just a smaller amount of effort that's not a course reassign, but maybe it's like reassignment from committee work or something like that for a time period.
It
We
just
can be
depends.
very flexible with how we propose time.
Yeah, it just depends on the scope of the research. Like I wouldn't have been able to do my projects that I proposed if I did not get reassigned time or summer salary. Then you can also apply for money to go travel to conferences or pay for students. And that's the one thing that I guess we haven't said yet is that I've applied for grants to pay for students, and that's been the majority of the money. Because I mean, I don't know if you all have experienced this yet, but I don't think I've met a student who hasn't had to work their way through EKU, right? And so if we don't, so if they're just doing this pro bono, they're less likely to do it. So I've been getting grants to pay students. We also are trying to, Sara and I started trying to pay our students more. And so we've been able to pay them up to $15, $18 an hour, which means they don't go work at IHOP and work their way out of college. And so those are strategies that have been successful for both. They get work done with us, but then they also get something out of it. And they're like, okay, no, I really want to do this now. Okay, you're going to pay me. Okay, right. And so that's been something that's a strategy that's been helpful. Okay. We've talked about that. I'm going to go on to the next one. Once you've established, we've kind of talked about this, but maybe we could add more. Once you've established a productive scholarly routine, how do you maintain it? Kind of touched on that. And does anyone want to build on that anymore? Maybe we've already gone over all that. I don't know. What other questions do we have in the audience?
Another one, sticking on the outsider perspective. You know, being the first signature in a journal B level, both of those are new things to me. So is there a crash course in scholarship and resources? You know, love a YouTube video. I'm sure that doesn't exist, but you know, is there any sort you know, anything out there that I could look into and just kind of get that crash course?
I think talking to your colleagues, talk to your chair. And just say, look, honestly, I don't even know what's going on. But can you just fill me in? And your colleagues will be happy to help you. And it's different from field to field. So you don't want to ask me, right? You want to ask someone in your field.
Refer back to the P&T guidelines too, that can guide you in how to prioritize.
Okay.
But I think the more people you talk to, the big thing is like I said, my mentor always called it a big game, and you need to know the rules of the game. How are the points scored? What's valuable? What's not valuable? And the more, so none of my family members were in academia. They didn't do any of that. So I know my mentor always told me, go reach out to people. And this was back when like Skype was popular than Zoom. Go Skype with people, call them on the phone, ask for their advice. How do they get to their position? What does it take to be successful? How do you get tenure? I think there's a lot of like senior faculty that would be willing to pick up the phone, or faculty at other institutions, or grabbing even coffee with people here to figure out how things work. But I agree with Jason, it's different from field to field, but I think that's just part of it, is talking to people, figuring out how they play the game in your area.
Okay, I'm going to give a plug for Sara's PLC that she's not currently doing this year, but she just said she may be doing it in the future. I went through it, I don't know, 3 years ago, probably. I believe it was called, first semester was from idea to data, and then second semester was data to publication. Because I had no experience in this coming here. I was a school administrator all those years. And Sara took us by the hand and broke down the whole process. And we ended up with publications and understanding all that lead author and all that stuff that I never knew about. So keep your eyes open for future PLC. And also I think Victel probably has, I'm not sure what is on the schedule, but Victel is an amazing resource for all that too.
Videos as well that I could connect with and maybe a good consultation program as well. But
and that was adapted from the student classes. So the thesis 1, thesis 2, publication classes that I was talking about, this is Honors has a version. In my department, we have our version. McNair has a version. And some of those classes, the students are getting some of that content as well to end up getting them published. And you can go along with the class as well, if that makes sense.
I can also put just a little plug in for a library resource that some of you might find helpful. I'm going to put a link in the chat, and Rusty can share that later. But basically, we have, we have subject guides, library guides for students for different topics. You might be familiar with that. We also have built some guides that are really targeted at faculty and upper level students. And so some of the topics that are covered is like vetting predatory publishers and making sure you don't publish with them, figuring out what the impact factor is, finding ways to publish where you don't have to do article submission fees. Some of you may have run across legitimate, like open access journals. They're not predatory publishers, but they require you to pay a fee so that your article can be open access. The library is starting to develop agreements with publishers whereby if we subscribe to those journals, then faculty at our institution can publish for free in those journals. We're just getting started in this right now. American Chemical Society is one, and we're working on developing some others. So the guide that I've shared the link with Rusty has more information about that. Also, really quick, I want to take a poll of the room. So like I wasn't sure what all we were going to do today, so I have a little slide deck. There's not time to do it now, but if I were to do a TLI or some kind of presentation that was like library tips for your scholarly agenda, would you come to that? Is that something you would be interested in? It's all very practical, like resources. Okay, people in the chat are saying yes. What do people in the room think? Okay.
Lots of head shakes and yeses.
All right. Well, I will propose this to FCT&L and keep an eye out for that. So everybody needs to come if I do it, because I've had some TLIs where like 2 people came. So I'm looking at you all.
Kelly, if you do that, can you make it a Zoom?
Yeah, it'll be
Zoom
yes.
option also, please. Thank you.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So my research agenda is I pretty much wrote my chapter 1 and 2 of my dissertation to be like at least a decade's worth of research. And so my approach at this point has pretty much just been like lifting things for my dissertation, and I've already gotten 3 presentations out of it. And the research I'm doing this semester is just a replication of a study that was first done 20 years ago. Is there ever a point in your, or at which point in your career is that type of approach no longer acceptable or feasible?
If it works, it's feasible.
Okay.
Okay. Just a practical question when it comes to guarding time for research. Obviously, teaching is a huge priority here, and I want to prioritize students. Are there effective ways to articulate to students the necessity of blocking out some time for research if they're wondering, why aren't you available then? Are there practical ways to articulate that, but make it clear to them that they are, still that priority in the teaching aspect of things. So
I also try to keep my calendar very organized. I like the colors. Print every semester. I print off a calendar and I put it on outside my door. So if students go by, they can see, okay, he's doing research there, he's doing this, blah, blah, blah. And of course, my Outlook calendar is always the full thing because it's dynamic and it has everything else. But I try to let them know, like, it'll be there. And then I have a link to my actual dynamic calendar. They can take a QR code and go take a look at it.
Yeah, one of the tools that I love that I started using when I was coordinating our program was the Calendly link, which is so you can block out your calendars to make time available, and then you just have direct people to your Calendly link to find times that you're available. That's worked beautifully.
On the same note, we started using Microsoft, the scheduler, what is it called? It's not Forms, it's the other one. It's the app within Microsoft, and it works the same, and it's already connected. So there's ways to do that. I really think routine goes a long way. So if you have a rhythm, like if you always teach the same days and the other days you do research, or one of the days a week, I think students pick up on those things. And you can be explicit, like, you know, on these days I'm focusing on the class, you can ask me those questions, and then on these days and I think they pick up on it and they get into the rhythms. You set up the rhythms and they follow your rhythms in my experience.
Sure. Sometimes too, even when you're teaching, if you've got a publication that's related to the topics that you're covering, if you show them that, you know, you can be like, hey, this is a project I worked on with some of my other peers, or maybe even other students, and show them like, this is what we were able to learn from that. That kind of lets it click that, oh, you don't just teach, you also are doing research, and these are some of the topics that you're working on too.
Oh, it was bookings, Microsoft bookings.
Yeah,
Sorry.
bookings too. They're all correct. I'm going to be a little bit more harsh, just in case no one has told you this. You don't owe your students all of your time. You are allowed to have a personal life. You are allowed to not answer your emails on the weekend. If you have a doctor's appointment, good for you for taking care of yourself. And if they ask you why you're not available, it is not their business. It's not, you don't have to explain to them why you're not available at a particular time. As long as you are providing them with the time that they need, you're showing up for class, you have your office hours, all the things that are expected of us. Don't feel like you have to give up every single space in your calendar to your students. They are like water. They will fill up empty spaces. Build a dam. We do not owe them all of our time. I love them, but we do not owe them all of our time. We do not owe them explanations. You don't have to explain to them why you're not available at a particular time. You don't.
This remind me, we've mentioned before about winter break and summer break and all of this stuff, and everyone is free to do whatever they want and whatever they can and however they can organize it. But I think it's definitely possible, and I encourage all my mentees to take a proper winter break, take a proper summer break. All the work will be there when you come back. And, you know, it's important to take care of yourself, and that is hard to do if you don't take breaks. So I do believe you can have a productive scholarly agenda and be like, hey, I'm in Spain for 2 weeks. I'm not answering anything, and bye. And that's fine too. And, you know, you can make it, get tenure and do all that, doing that every year, and it's not a problem.
And just one minor yes and to all of that was, so in your email, you have the automatic responder that you're out for this period of time. Don't expect an immediate answer.
And just I have at the bottom of my email, the note says, I may not answer my email during evenings or weekends, so please adjust your expectations accordingly. And I never get any pushback on it.
It's great.
Answering emails on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. If you want to, go ahead. You don't have to.
I answer all of them.
Nope, you do not have to.
Okay, are we about at time?
Yes, 1 minute.
Okay. Very good. I think we're good unless. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much to our panelists this afternoon. A really incredible panel. I have worked with each of them in many different ways. They are faculty members and leaders on campus that I greatly respect, but also so much good advice as you move into your second semester, but also keeping in mind that you're thinking a few years down the road. As well. Publication times can vary. Grant response rates can vary widely. There are several links in your guide for today. They are written by scholars from other universities for the most part. But there is a really cool series of links focused on what the original research team calls the paper sprint. Tom Martin, the Dean of the College of Business, and I have been working on this for several years. These pieces, I think, are really valuable for faculty because they get at many of the ideas shared by our panelists here. One is that you need to be intentional about how you manage your time in ways that will work for you. Two, collaboration can be incredibly valuable, and you can do that in strategic and meaningful ways. But take a look through those articles, take a look through those resources, and I think there's a lot of good information that will resonate and build on what our panelists shared today. If you want to do any sort of follow-up, if you want additional access to materials, just let me know and I can share that with you. So with that, it was fantastic to see all of you. Thanks again to our awesome panel. And I wish you all a great Friday and weekend, and we'll see you again very soon. Thanks, everyone. And thanks to our Zoom panelists and our Zoom attendees as well. Have a good Friday, everyone. Thank you. Good seeing you.